I'm really excited to introduce Cyber Collective, which was founded in 2020 as the only woman of color owned and operated community-centered research organization that focuses on data ethics, privacy, and cybersecurity research, and directly tackles the tension between business interests and society's well-being. And we have with us Tazin Khan, who is the founder of Cyber Collective, Fara Islam, who is the Creative Research and Development Manager, Rebecca Richard, who is the Creative Research and Development Manager, and Kelly Rajeski, Director of Programs and Marketing. So I will turn the floor over to you all if you want to turn your cameras on.
Hello. Look at all these people, these faces. Saima, thank you so much. Thank you so much to Barnard for having us and for the Cyber Collective team for making time tonight to be here as well. Today, I know that historically you all have had one speaker, and Cyber Collective, just as it is in the name, we're a collective of people, and we couldn't do this work without one another. So the structure of today, I'll start off giving a little bit of background about the work that we do, a little bit of that big picture information, and then I'm going to hand over the mic to the team where they'll take a few minutes to introduce themselves, who they are. And then we're going to set it up more like a panel discussion and answer some questions as a group, and hopefully get everybody that is in here involved in having a dialogue. So with that being said, let me go ahead and share my screen. If you can drop in the chat where you're from, who you are, you know, your mother's maiden name, your any other personally identifiable information. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Let me share my screen. Awesome. Can everybody see my screen?
We see it.
Amazing. So we are Cyber Collective, and thank you so much for the introduction and background of our org. Our organization is dedicated to helping people think critically about their relationship with technology while helping them become more secure and private online. And our goal is to really inspire a more socially responsible future. We believe that if we can help communities develop agency and autonomy as it relates to technology, we can help lower the spread of misinformation and disinformation, help dismantle systemic failures of our digital media systems. And that's why we're so excited to be here today and talk about the responsible tech movement. There's a big problem that I feel like many of us are aware of, and it's the fact that we need to protect the digital age, right? Today, technology is way more than just scrolling through memes or catching a convenient ride. We love a good meme. It's definitely, technology is an extension of who we are and how we show up in the world. And I think Cyber Collective is built on our lived experiences and first-hand experiences, both the positive and the negative effects of technology. And some of the lack of ethics that exist today, and especially around security and privacy awareness, which end up leading to indirect biases and algorithms from social media to healthcare, and increases in accessibility to knowledge. The origin story essentially, you know, is twofold for Cyber Collective. One part of it is, you know, when the team came together in 2020 during we all felt activated to do something, and this is the way that we knew how. And we kind of formed and unleashed into our programming. And then the other part of it, when I, you know, first thought of the idea for this organization, it was out of a sincere sense of loneliness in the industry. And then Also, because my dad, he got hacked. And when I was trying to help him go through the process of securing his information, I asked him to go against what he knows and lie for his security question. So if you all, you're probably aware, obviously we have security questions and answers to be able to authenticate ourselves when trying to get into certain platforms and tools. And my dad was so scared. He said, how can I possibly lie about my security answers? The bank knows my information. I'll be penalized. He thought he could lose his citizenship, literally, if he lied to the bank and told them, a different answer about the make of his first car or his mother's maiden name. He didn't understand that those were questions that he chose and were set up to help him remember his method of authentication. And in that moment, I realized that, well, if my dad's experiencing this, there must be other people experiencing this. And we learned throughout a lot of our programming in the past, year and a half that we've launched, that while the story might not be the same, the similarity of sentiment is that there's a lot of technology, a lot of things that we're involved with, but we don't always really know what to do with it or how it impacts us in the long run. Specifically, as it relates to security, in 2021 alone, over 1,200 breaches occurred around the world, exposing millions, possibly billions of people's information, opening the door to a range of digital theft. And in 2020, 47% of Americans experienced some sort of financial identity theft, resulting in losses of more than $500 billion. The full impact of these breaches is unknown, given the fact that a lot of the reporting is dark, it's private information. Companies don't necessarily report it. And then obviously the delayed effects of a breach, it doesn't happen right away. And what you see here is a very high level diagram of how things kind of connect, right? Companies collect our information. And some of these companies don't have proper security or the right people working for them that understand security and can implement proper awareness, which then can lead to lack of security hygiene, lack of protocol, and lack of awareness, which then in turn can cause a security breach. Data is exposed, it can become weaponized by bad actors or people with malicious intent. And then from there, it leads to identities being stolen and people being impacted. And unfortunately, because of the systemic disparities that already exist in society, right? Marginalized people are disproportionately impacted and affected. And so it's a cycle that continues, but a cycle that, we're confident we can help break at our organization through our programming and through conversations like this, and trying to get people a part of our mission. So our programming is really simple on how we're tackling all of this. We believe that through simplified content that breaks down technology's effect on people and their communities, that we can offer folks accessible tools and practices to start protecting themselves today. We host workshops, we create resources, and we also are implementing quarterly town halls. And so our work is really designed, like I said earlier, to empower that critical thinking and empower participatory governance, right? To drive change in technology, which is where the narratives come in and how our lived experiences can indeed shape the way that we interact with and the way technology is created. And we're really thankful and proud of developing a space where a diverse group of people, despite your technical or academic background, can share their lived experiences, and it's a space that honors our identities. So these are some of our core values of what drives us: safety, education, open dialogue, creation, and evolution. Safety is really important to us. We want people to feel seen, heard, respected, and valued for their contributions, experiences, and perspectives. Education, obviously, because we want to create accessible opportunities for self-education and group learning, for non-technical approaches to address complex information. Open dialogue is central. That's why it's in the middle. It's the meat of what we do. We believe in honest conversations about who we are, how it shapes our relationships with technology, and what we need to feel safer online and offline. Creation, this was big for us because, I feel like we do things a little differently than industry standard. We love using pop culture, memes, TikTok slang, to be honest, and all of the things. Any type of creative, unique idea we try to implement. And then the last part, there's a book by Jennifer Armbrust called The Proposals for a Feminine Economy. And she wrote a book alongside that called The Business Birthing Handbook. And she talks a lot about the approach to creating something and slowing down to have better ideas and larger impact, as opposed to what we understand today, which is move fast and be urgent. So these are our driving principles, and these principles truly wouldn't exist without our core team. And without further ado, I would love to introduce everybody here. So I know that Saima went through a few high-level introductions, but I'm going to let each of our teammates share a little bit about themselves. And then after that, we can dive into the panel discussion. You're on mute, Fara.
I guess these headphones just decided not to work today. Hopefully everybody can hear me now. Yeah? Okay, well, happy Monday, everybody. Sometimes it's not a happy Monday, but I hope your Monday today is very happy. My name is Fara. I described myself as a tech and public policy intersector, humorist, and idea bouncer. My background is currently I'm a Master's of Public Policy student at UVA and currently a cyber safety intern at Trust Lab, where we look into misinformation and how to kind of look into content moderation, how misinformation impacts certain communities. And I'm also going to be, for this summer, an incoming trust and safety intern at TikTok. So excited to see how content moderation works in that way, how harmful information can be put out in that way, and what can we do about that? How can we be preventative instead of reactive? I'm also an Aquarius. I guess that kind of shows, I feel like that's the humor side in me, taking everything in life as a joke a little bit, but then also putting like a humanitarian aspect into it. And then interests outside of work, I really love to explore anything and everywhere. I'm down to do anything you want to do. Just take me there. Just give me a ride, honestly. I love chefing it up in the kitchen. I also really love true crime and conspiracy. It's an unhealthy relationship, but like the more you think about certain things, you're just like, how? And especially with like metaverse and like things that Zuckerberg sometimes talks about, you just don't know what to think. And then I always love spending time with family.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kaylee. I will say I definitely have learned a lot from Fara humor-wise. She does always, come with the zingers. And I aspire to work that into my day-to-day life. Gotta, take those bits, carry them with me wherever I go. But I am the director of marketing and programming at Cyber Collective. I joined the team about a year ago, and I'm really proud to think about like where we were then and how far we've come. But I'm creative. I love photography, video, and everything, and that's what got me into like the social media world. My focus is on marketing and content strategy and community building, and I'm a big advocate for digital wellness. I talk and do a lot of research about like mental health and how social media affects our mental health and how we can, um, you know, have our own journeys around like what balance means for us. And a lot of that was driven by my work being a social media manager and a content creator at the same time, trying to just not be on my screens 24/7. So it's been interesting to see how everything has evolved and how our culture has evolved with it. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But I am a triple fire sign, if anybody's familiar with astrology, and I would say that's pretty true too. And then outside of work, when I'm not on my computer, I'm bouncing around, hanging out with family and friends, of course, and my dog. I've recently adopted a dog named Arlo. Um, and then yeah, just the TikTok. I think in TikTok audios, I navigate my life like that. Like, I my current TikTok that I'm on is Hot Girl ADHD Hack. So if anybody can relate to that, we could connect after. But yeah, that's all enough about me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I'm looking at my titles now, and I feel like it's so hard to pick one because I do 8,000 different things, but I do photography, I do YouTube, I'm a web developer. I did also work in cybersecurity and then quit my job and went full-time freelance. So we're doing freelance, we're doing a little bit of everything. That's the title that I like to go by the most, is just to call myself a digital creator, because there's just so many different things to make. I can't just stick to one. I am a Taurus. I have definitely filled out the birth charts a few times. I've lost every single one, so I do not know the other things that are part of my zodiac, but I am a Taurus. And when I am not at work, I love doing yoga. I saw Kaylee put hot yoga. I specifically like hot yoga too. I love hiking. I like eating really good food. I appreciate a good meal. And then I love spending time with my family because I am obsessed with all of my little nieces and nephews. So that is all of me.
Hi. Well, I was speaking earlier, but I am a security specialist. I'm also a content creator. I like to think of myself as a big picture thinker. And I work at Cyber Collective, obviously, but then during the day, I am a part of Cisco Secure, and I do advocacy management there and a part of the thought leadership team. I co-host their Security Stories podcast, which is really fun. I just found out what time I was born after 30 years of not knowing. And I learned that I'm a double Cancer Capricorn moon, and it really shows, which is great. Interests outside of work, anything that brings my inner child joy. I feel like I had to grow up really early, and now as an adult, I try to do kid things. So I'm always doing arts and crafts, playing kickball, freeze tag with my friends when it's nice outside. I really love writing in my journal. I love reading sci-fi books and trying to spend time with the people that I love. And the goal of sharing our little dating slides essentially here was to really talk about who we are as individuals, because it ties into what we're going to dive into next. Well, yeah, I'll go into the questions. So cool. Now we can open up the floor for anybody to share their stories as well. But I mean, who wants to go first? Kaylee, Rebecca, Fara, how do you think your personal narrative shapes your work within the tech industry? I'll stop there and let one of you.
I don't mind going first. I'll go first. So throughout my entire journey in tech, when I was in high school taking courses down to being in college, I never fully felt like I belonged in the spaces that I was in. I didn't really see people that looked like me. So from the get, everything that I have done throughout my journey in tech has been to kind of create a space for people to join me and just know that there are people that look like this, that are in cybersecurity, are web developers, and can do and are capable of doing all of these things. I've had a few experiences where you're just immediately underestimated. You go into the conversation and they're already expecting you to not know anything. So specifically with Cyber Collective, and the reason why I really wanted to join and contribute and be part of it is because I wanted to create a space where anybody can learn. Specifically with cybersecurity, it's already a subject that sounds scary if you're not in tech. So just creating a space where you can ask the questions, you can learn everything you need to know, and you can feel like you're a part of tech and you're supposed to be here without any fear of judgment or feeling of not belonging.
I love that. Agree. That's one on all points. Farah, share how your personal narrative shapes your work in the industry.
Yeah, I would say honestly, mine is like a little bit similar to Rebecca's as well. I felt like growing up, like I was really into software development and like seeing like what that has to offer in terms of like technical aspects and like technical skills. But then like the more I got into like this work, or like the more that you just see in history and how like history recycles itself inevitably, and how justice is like underserved in certain communities, and how that also like is getting translated in technology. Growing up, like always saw policy and technology as two different things. And I always thought that I had to choose one or the other, and I couldn't mix both together. And it wasn't until even like my second year of college where I was like, you know what, like these two things are like pulling me together, and like I really want to combine it. Let me try and do something together. Let me try to do like a research project on something like this. And then the pandemic hit, so then I couldn't really explore that much, except for like what was on Instagram, what I could do on my personal level. Everything just sort of shut off. And so me stumbling upon like Taz's profile and seeing how she is bringing in like marginalized voices into the technical space, I'm like, oh crap, like I've been wanting to do this, and now this is a medium in which I can. So how did that work play into Psycho? I DM'd her, I sent her a comment. I was like, please, like, I want to know what you're doing, and I just want to learn from you. Honestly, I thought I was going to get ghosted for a while, and I kind of did. And it wasn't until like a few months later where I get like a comment back, and it's like, send me your resume, we'll see what we can do. And then the rest is history. But honestly, like as I was saying before, like my work with Cyber Collective as of like thus far has further validated how like history likes to recycle itself in different forms, how groups can be targeted in a certain way, how different beliefs can cause harm in unforeseen ways. And honestly, you see all of these products online, and just because a product works doesn't mean it works for good all of the time. So how can we access that gap and become preventative instead of reactive? And honestly, I saw it through Cyber Collective's growing community and through all of our discussions, like the online community, that everything's connected to one another. And so bringing in all the people, all of the perspectives that typically aren't in the space is also a narrative to consider when we're bringing in that gap with technology and policy. That was pretty long, so sorry, but my personal narrative.
Don't you ever apologize for speaking, okay? I love that you mentioned our workshops too, and something that's important to note, right? We started our programming, we were really ambitious in October. Never again will we do workshops once a week because that was insanity. But in October of 2020, we like really hit the ground running because we were energized. And we had thousands of people register and join our workshops on a global level, which was very crazy to think that somehow, you know, some of us in the States came together, and we all met on Instagram, which is also another story to share. But we had people that were, I mean, we had librarians join, aeronautic space engineers join, tech bros, teachers, engineers, security folks that are in the security industry, musicians, creatives, artists. I mean, we had an entire gamut of different people join our workshops, which really emphasize the importance of lived experiences. So I did want to share that part. But Kaylee, I'd love to know your perspective of why you believe personal narratives are central to the impact technology has on society, because I know you have some thoughts about that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I I think back to I guess like the main thing I can do is speak to my experience and kind of the insights I drew from that and how it's moved its way forward. But as I mentioned before, early on in my college career, I knew I wanted to be really involved with social media, and that was like at the time where social media people weren't really like fully behind it yet and adopting it as a marketing strategy. People knew it was important, but it was still like not really brought into the way that people were learning about marketing and talking about marketing. And it was very like trivialized in certain aspects. So I always found it so interesting, like you know when talking about technology, when talking about the ways to reach people with new messages, how things like rise up, gain popularity, that are at first like really shoved down or like looked down upon. And I remember also taking this internet law and policy class, like basically that showed how over time, what Farah was saying, things repeat itself, and there's so many things that go on within technology, within telecommunications, and the complexity of it, and that everyday people just don't really have a grasp on, don't feel, let alone feel empowered by. So that was a big moment for me, is just like opening my eyes to, wow, all of this stuff is happening. I was somebody who was trying to like understand like the impact that these like tools could make and how to move forward our culture. And then there was this really significant moment for me where I got hit in the head by a ping pong ball at a WeWork. And I knew that that wasn't, something was missing there in terms of community for me in this startup technology space. I was subscribed. I loved the entrepreneurial energy. And yet every time I tried to go to one of these events or anything like that, it was a miss in terms of welcoming all people from all different backgrounds and thought processes to contribute to the conversation and what the future was going to look like and where it was going to go. So all of those things are like very high level, but then over time in my career, it's really evolved in seeing how important social media is, or like these channels, these technology channels that we use every single day to communicate and bringing people together and highlighting new messages. And I'm always thinking about how I can best contribute. And when I found Cyber Collective and realized Taz was doing a lot of work to elevate the conversation and bring different people's voices and faces into places that they weren't typically at, that's where I started to get more clarity around like the best thing I can do is like could do whatever they need to do to be like lifted up, because it's very seeing those people, seeing Taz even come into play with some of the like content she's made for Cyber Collective, the security, privacy, and other bullshit show, having people say like fuck unethical tech, sorry, but that's important, right? Because like you're reaching people in a certain mindset that they have, and it's finally clicking. And so I guess all of that to say, when I think about how personal narratives are central to the impact, it's like it's a click for people when people can understand or see themselves like in, or see, even feel welcomed into the conversations that we're having. That makes all the difference in like moving the needle forward and understanding each other, being inclusive, or getting like the point across, and like getting like the takeaways to happen, when which you are so much more able to absorb when you're in like a comfortable space. So yeah, that was a very, very long way of saying I got hit in the head with a ping pong ball and nothing was the same after. But yeah.
I love that so much. And, as we, thank you for sharing. The comedy is really why I have these ladies around, to be honest. But, I was thinking about even the way that our work at Cyber Collective has changed. And Farah, Rebecca, I feel like the both of you can really speak to this too. We personally, because so much of Cyber Collective's brand started with just my voice, I feel like, and I'm really thankful that it's become more of a collective voice as we've worked with people and work with different folks. And the biggest lesson that I learned about how personal narratives are central to the impact that technology has on society. I'll share a story. I used to have a very, very absolute perspective about certain digital media systems, tools, for example, like TikTok, right? I still don't have one, but this is a really great lesson learned about growth and goes back to a lot of our values, like the evolution piece, the creation and the open dialogue and safety. I had such absolute views about why TikTok is bad and how they're collecting certain types of information. The organization that built a lot of TikTok's technology, the partnerships they have with the surveillance technologies that exist that are impacting the Uyghur Muslims in different spaces. There's a lot of connectivity, right? Which we can consider for any technology that we use. But the piece was through our workshops, through the content that we made, I was like learning that, a lot of people really like TikTok. And who am I to shit on that idea, right? And who am I as somebody that's trying to center personal narratives, bringing an absolute perspective into a space where we're trying to be open and create an environment where people feel secure, safe, and confident in how they interact with technology and meet them where they are. And I think that it was other people's lived experiences that really, really, really taught me that as a leader, and how I could help implement that messaging. And then also this incredible team that taught me that. I think we do a ton of really great peer mentorship across one another to help shape the way that the organization blossoms. But I wanted to share that story because it was other people's narratives that helped me shape my perspective and how we were bringing messaging forward. And now, because of that one experience, we're able to really talk about our work in a broader view, in a way that is even more inclusive to people and meeting them where they are. And that was impacted by other people's narratives. And so this is an example of, for an awareness and educational company, how narratives were so important to the way that we share our curriculum and information. And if you consider that and the way technology is being made, what if there was a feedback loop that existed where different people that are experiencing different things on certain tools, like proctoring tools that can't identify certain melanated skin tones, right? That's a lived experience that certain people have and others do not. And the feedback is what allowed it. But because there was a lack of colored people creating that tool, that's why that problem existed to begin with. And that's why it is so important and crucial to have stories in the central part of how we build technology, because a lot of people that are building tech and that are building tools are building it for the convenience of humanity, not realizing that a lot of times the global majority is being left out of that dialogue because the majority people building don't represent the global majority, unfortunately. And there are a lot of books and information that talk about that. Dr. Sophia Moja Noble, who is our advisor, wrote the book Algorithms of Oppression. And it's hard to read because she talks so much of, just up in like the responsible tech movement and centering, like being able to be proud of who you are just got cool in 2020. In 2020, people are able, there's movement happening, right? And it also, I think that not only our personal narratives are central to the impact that technology has on society, but the narratives of BIPOC people, I think should be leading the way, specifically Black women, in my opinion, because of their experiences through years and years and years of systemic oppression. But yeah, I got a little deep. I do want to, before we move into talking about how we plan to continue to center people's narratives, open up the floor for a second. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up the window, let in a little air and get people having some dialogue. If anybody feels empowered to say anything, we are recording. So if you want to keep your video off, feel free. But if you want to keep it on, you'll be recorded, just so you know. But if anybody wants to share, maybe how you're feeling after hearing this information, or even if you want to share how your own narrative has impacted the way you interact with technology, or if you work in the tech industry, how it's impacted your work so far.
We have some really good comments in the chat. And I'm not sure if people would like to share it themselves. But we have somebody who works as a marketer and was saying that they're in a constant internal struggle because while they know social media can be used for good, it's constantly abused. And as a marketer, they want to understand data and work for companies that use customer data in a respectful way. So that's a really hard thing to gauge when you're on the job market and just trying to look for something that will sustain you as a job, but then also concerned about some of these more complicated issues. I'm just curious, do you have conversations do people come to you and talk to you about how can I gauge the ethical kind of responsibilities of a company before I work for them? Or how do I gauge how this platform is using my data?
Are you asking us?
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure if
this is on behalf of the person who commented. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I've gone back and forth doing horizontal mentoring with a lot of my peers, and I have had the privilege of being quite shameless in my life. I think it's because of my Muslim upbringing that I felt I had a hand over my mouth, and that's why I was always so outspoken in my experiences. And I've made a lot of mistakes in how I approach conversation and dialogue around things that I'm passionate about. And I think the feedback that I can give is one, even if your voice is quivering, what you want to say is worth saying, right? It's scary to speak up in moments. And if you want to have a dialogue about more ethical practices, say in an organization, and call people in, I think that knowing if you personally are rooted in the betterment and the good of an organization, I think that in order to get organizations to listen sometimes, unfortunately, they don't really care about individual narratives. And so when you go to speak to an executive or anybody that's a stakeholder in a business, being able to align what you're feeling in a holistic fashion to how it may impact the long-term or downstream effects of that business is what I believe gets people to listen and consider the ethical feedback that you want to give, and some tactical, tangible ways that I've been able to implement it at my day job at Cisco. Actually, literally happened today. We are working on a project that's under NDA that I can't talk about, but You know, somebody said, my job is just to sell the technology and do it. Somebody else can deal with the responsible stuff and all the ethics. And you know, the quintessential question that I ask is, do you mind elaborating a little? And when people start to elaborate, they realize what they're saying sounds a little bit like horseshit, because it is their responsibility, right? Because you're a part of the ecosystem. And something that a former teammate, volunteer at Cyber Collective, Caroline Sue, who we love and adore so deeply, she taught me to ask questions instead of making statements. That's a really great way to start, by asking questions of where people are. Your personal experience relates to what you're talking about, and then tying it in to how it can impact the business. So how it worked out in this scenario, I asked a couple of questions about, what do you mean you don't feel responsible? Whose responsibility is it then? And what is our job if it isn't to think about the holistic element of how our products impact society? And he said, I'm not sure that I have that answer. And then I said, do you mind if I share something personal? And he said, sure. And I said, you know, as a Muslim Bangladeshi woman who has, and I shared an anecdote that related to the project that we're working on, and I can't really share that much about the project, but I was able to make a connection and get him to level with me. And he leveled with me, and he heard me and he saw me. And he then did feel responsible. And he said, well, Taz, I don't really have a hand in this, but here are the people that you can talk to. And I'd love to make a connection for you. And I was able to then let him know that these are the ways that I think it can benefit the project by thinking about the ethics behind what we're doing. And he was so thankful for that. And I'm not saying that this is the way that this will turn out every time. Everybody is different, but if you're rooted in empathy, if you stay curious, because it's not just about sharing your narrative, but it's also meeting people where they are to make sure they can receive your narrative through compassion, then change can happen, and change happens in those little moments.
I wanted to chime in and talk more about like how different personal narratives like really aid in our technology. I feel like, as like we've seen, is that I feel like, oh, like back, I don't want to say back in the day, I was about to say back in the day, but like how people are framing technology is that it's applicable to everybody. But then you look at the default on who it applies to, and the default is actually white cis male, you know? So then you see that, and then you try, and then you wonder like how many personal narratives are actually on the table. And usually in the cybersecurity space or even the technology space, we still see that. And so I think for me, at least, like trying to talk to as many people with so many like diverse opinions, and like how does that impact them, but then changing the default to everyone, like absolutely everyone. But then how do you also make that mark on like getting everybody, because then you get a certain amount of people and you get your certain diverse amount, and once you get your diverse amount, you think, okay, that checked the box. But it's ever changing, people are always joining the conversation, so it's important to note that the dialogue never ends. Like the default is ever changing, and technology isn't the only actor of change, it's us. And as long as we're changing and like unlearning and learning, that's important to apply that into technology as well, because we're the actors of change. We're changing everything. We're trying to change every system. Technology is just a system itself.
Spitting bars. I love that so much. Kaylee, Becca, do you have anything to add or you want to share? Okay. Noted. I do. I want to read a comment, and it says, as someone who's passionate about politics, policy, and activism, I was intrigued by how technology could be used and unfortunately abused by global leaders, in parentheses, Trump in fighting violence at the Capitol, the Nigerian government banning Twitter for almost a year, and lifting the ban ahead of the presidential election. Seeing how the use of technology could harm marginalized voices inspired me to be more interested in the ethics of technological advancement. And I think that sharing that is so powerful because there are so many global narratives that exist as well. And it goes back to what you just said, Farah, and what we were talking about earlier, where in order for people, something I learned, a lesson, in order to know that for my personal narrative and story to reach, I got to be open to even the personal narratives that I don't want to listen to. So, but in order, like you said, for technology to really be for everyone. And what I'm realizing more and more and more, when I talk to people face to face and they hear a tone, and the tone is of curiosity, right? We can't always have compassion if we're angry, especially if we're experiencing things that don't allow us to feel kind, understandably so. But through curiosity, I've been able to personally learn so much and also help shift perspective that people had, because a lot of times going back to Dr. Noble's book, and her research in this book is really about how search engines reinforce racism. And through our work at Cyber Collective and how we first started, it was really about the Black squares that were being posted on Instagram and how people didn't realize what that meant, right? And then additionally, when we told people, when we were hearing people say, well, understandably, it's no person of color's responsibility to have to explain things to another person of privilege that perhaps doesn't understand the narrative. However, pushing that person to Google, unfortunately, Google is not giving the right answers, right? Google is an advertising tool, and Google is going to advertise to you what you already want and what you already have within your digital ecosystem. They're called digital echo chambers, right? It's going to give you the same information that you're putting out. And that was a really large part of why we started the programming that we started and having the ethical part of our dialogue. But I say this all to say that, narratives from all over, even if we disagree with them, matter. And if we want to be heard, we have to hear others. And in order to really understand, I think, the full spectrum of what responsible technology means, there has to be a way for us to invite more curiosity into dialogue, and create avenues of curiosity and feedback loops of curiosity. And perhaps the tangible ways to achieve that are through surveys or polls, or tech companies to be able to have a feature request or some sort of feedback loop for people to be able to share their experiences. And then obviously, thankfully, to different organizations and conversations like this, we can have our own dialogue as well. But I wanted to add that in relation to the comment.
Yeah, and I just have to bring up the interdisciplinarity of your collective. And I know you did like such cute introductions at the beginning, but I was also really struck by how many different backgrounds you have on your team. And I think that that is really important when you think about how to reframe technology from the personal narrative perspective, right? So for me, it's like bringing non-tech thinking into tech, and however you want to frame that, whether it's like humanities and social science thinking into tech, or diversifying the way that tech is taught. But I think it's just a really important thing to consider in terms of even the organizations and the work that you do. And I saw on your website that you partnered with a policy company called Elroy, right? And you're creating all of these different kinds of partnerships. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. Like, how do you make these partnerships? Why do you think they're important? Why do you think it's important to, partner with policy orgs and do work on the Hill and that kind of stuff?
I think everybody can say something to this, right? But a large part of the way that the strategy of our partnerships is, one, trying to get the message across to various verticals and industries outside of the scope of our own, which was number one. My personal goal in partnering with certain organizations was just through my lived experiences, because I was normally in my peer circle the only one in the security industry, and most of my peers are creatives, artists. My brother is a musician, my dad drove a taxi, my mom cashier at a Walmart, right? And so my goal was to, in partnering with Elroy specifically, they do a lot of policy work and they're creating a tool to reach everybody, which was my personal goal. But I think that we, as an organization, really tried to drive, and at least, the team can speak to this, we try to empower one another to make relationships and partnerships and bring people in. But partnering with the policy part of things, which is still very new to me personally. Fara is the policy expert on the team, I would say. And I personally am learning how we can bring the voices from our workshops and the different content that we create and the feedback loops that we've developed to bring it to policy dialogue. We're a part of a coalition through Privacy Now with some of the largest privacy forward institutions and organizations in the US. And it's really cool to be a part of it. We're learning, we're more listeners than we are practitioners in that space. But Kaylee, do you want to add to some of your approach, especially with your partnerships and marketing background and your strategy?
Yeah, so I before Cyber Collective, like back a little bit before I even got into the technology industry, my focus was on pushing forward the B Corporation movement, which is like responsible capitalism. So there are socially and environmentally responsible companies that get certified. And in my experience working on that mission, we did a lot to create like an ecosystem of partners, because you realize at a certain point there's only so much you can do, and there's other people who are experts and community leaders and have access and an understanding that you will never have, and it's important to reach those people for like the end goal to be accomplished. And that I think is a really amazing way of thinking that the nonprofit space has. And when you start to overlap that in other industries and kind of like take those insights into other places, is where real innovation happens, and those impact from the partnerships that you can create like can actually happen. So I guess if anybody is looking to learn more about partnerships and ecosystem, or partnerships, impact partnerships, and that approach, thinking about your ecosystem and just like all of the different people that you want to be a part of, the collective that you're building, making sure that they're represented, or if they're not yet, that you're able to like leverage your network to find people that you want to bring into it. That's very, very intentional work that has to be done. And so I think when you take a step back and look at it beyond your organization at an individual level and think about that higher picture, then that's where like the impact can really happen.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So we're coming up on the hour. Do you have just a couple minutes? Because I think it's, first of all, important for you to tell everyone how to get involved with the collective and the work that you do. But also, I just wanted to read this comment. So a participant says, thank you for being here. I've been following Psycho's work for a while. I'm a technologist and sex worker who started teaching cybersecurity and computer literacy workshop for other sex workers. I completely agree with Taz about how working in tech, especially as a person with a marginalized identity, can be very lonely. And I appreciate seeing y'all's work towards tech liberation for all. So I think that's something that you should take as a compliment. I think that's a really wonderful thing to be able to share. And then Zoe says that a lot of this work feels similar to other forms of self-defense work for marginalized people. And I also wonder what digital self-defense would or does look like for queer and trans folk. So don't know if you want to comment on that, or she means digital self-defense community training. So if you want to respond to that and maybe say a little bit about how people can stay in touch and get involved with you.
Yeah, the ways that you can stay in touch, and that's a really great question. Was it Zoe? I can't see the chat that asked that question.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of organizations. Fight for Future is a great organization that is pushing toward more of that digital self-defense. We're less on the, on the fighting side of things and more on the kind of, I don't even know. I mean, how do I explain this? We got tired of fighting. And it's really exhausting being angry and fighting. I mean, the burnout was so real at the end of, do you all remember like the break, like going into December and fundraising into January 2021? It was crazy. And we decided that we really didn't want to fight anymore. And more so just allowing people to help people think critically and decide on their own if they want to fight, right? And giving people the valuable information that they need to piece the pieces together and then push them into the different spaces that they can go a part of the collective to continue the fight. We do have resources, and a lot of our resources right now can be found on our social media platforms through our Instagram carousels, which on Instagram, we are Cyber Collective Org, and I can drop that in the chat as well. And then our website is cybercollective.org. I would suggest signing up for our newsletter. We're moving into the month of Ramadan in April, so we'll be quite quiet around external facing things, but you can sign up for our newsletter and we'll be ramping back up in May. Ramadan is a time of meditation, and so we take that and implement it into our organization. You can also find us on Twitter at Get Psycho, and on LinkedIn, where you can find us as Cyber Collective. And we are going to be pushing out some different projects that we're looking for contributors for, and they're paid opportunities, which is like so exciting to be able to say, because we were recently funded and it's really fun and exciting to be able to say that. So keep an eye out for that if you want to get involved. And I wanted to just end the note on the takeaways, right? Like ways your lived experiences can shape the future of technology, and each of us created our own. I shared wearing your culture and story on your sleeve. Kaylee mentioned practicing digital mindfulness. Fara said, don't be afraid to be multifaceted. And Rebecca said, creating your own spaces. And these are the more existential elements, right? But the tangible way is to speak up and stay curious. And thank you everybody for sharing, and Barnard for having us in this kind of unique fashion compared to the other amazing talks that you all have had, and for staying and going 7 minutes over time.
Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna stop your sharing if that's okay, so I can see you all's faces. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I know that people who are watching really appreciate it. And I always love to hear from you, Taz, and I'm so glad I got to meet the other members of the collective, and now we're seeing some faces, so that's great. There'll be a recording of this edited, posted on our YouTube page. You can just Google Barnard CSE YouTube and keep in touch with us either on Instagram at Barnard_CSE. It's the same on Twitter. And I want to thank everybody again for taking the time to be with us tonight, and have a good night. Thanks, Psycho.
Thank you, Barnard.